On Thanksgiving, my parents stopped me at the front door and said, "You're not invited this year. Just go home." Behind them, I could see my sister, my uncle, and even my best friend laughing together around the table. I didn't argue. I just nodded, got back in my car, and made one quick phone call. 20 minutes later, my phone started blowing up, and the screaming began. "You won't believe what happened to me last Thanksgiving. My own family, slammed the door in my face, leaving me standing in the pouring rain, totally abandoned, right when I thought we were finally going to pretend to be a family. But what they didn't know was that their cruel act wasn't just a betrayal, it was the trigger for a fight they never saw coming, a fight that would unravel every secret and shatter every comfortable lie they'd built their lives around." I can still feel the rain pelting my windshield that day as I pulled up to my childhood home. The driveway never felt longer, like it was stretching out forever. I had this perfect, store-bought pumpkin pie on the passenger seat, having driven 3 hours through the absolute worst weather. All I wanted was that one day a year when our fractured family would just, pretend everything was fine. My mom, of course, was at the door before I even had a chance to knock. She stood there, arms crossed, wearing this apron I'd given her 2 Christmases ago. The smell of roasted turkey and sage was just pouring out from behind her, making my stomach absolutely rumble. I smiled, ready to shake off the cold, ready to step inside. And then she spoke. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was flat, empty. I actually laughed, thinking she had to be joking. "Mom, it's Thanksgiving. You told me to come at 4. Come on, hurry." She just slowly shook her head. "No. I don't think this is going to work. You should leave." My dad appeared behind her, his hand resting on her shoulder. He wouldn't even meet my eyes. Through the doorway, I could see right into the dining room. The table was already set, our good china sparkling. My sister, Gretchen, was in her usual spot, wine glass in hand. My uncle Kenneth was there, too, gesticulating wildly, telling some story. And then I saw her. Melanie. My best friend since 4th grade, the person I'd literally called crying just last week about my landlord raising my rent. They were all just laughing. "Dad?" My voice cracked, barely a whisper. "What is happening?" He cleared his throat, avoiding my gaze. "Your mother and I have decided it would be better if you spent the holiday elsewhere. We've talked about this as a family, and everyone agrees." "Everyone?" I looked past them again. Gretchen caught my eye and quickly looked away, but not before I saw something flash across her face. Guilt? Or maybe satisfaction? With my sister, those emotions often look disturbingly similar. "The Grants next door always have people over," my mom said, like she was offering some helpful advice. "I'm sure they wouldn't mind an extra person." My hands were shaking. I'd wrapped that pie so carefully in aluminum foil, tied a ribbon around the box. I'd stopped at 3 different stores to find the exact bourbon my father liked. It was still in my trunk, along with the gifts I'd bought for my niece and nephew. "I don't understand," my throat felt so tight. "Did I do something wrong?" My mother's expression hardened. "This isn't about you. This is about what's best for our family. Now, please go home." And then, she closed the door. I just stood there on the porch for what felt like an eternity, listening to the muffled sounds of conversation and laughter from inside. Someone turned up the music. I recognized the song. It was the one that always played during Thanksgiving when I was growing up, the one my father used to dance to while carving the turkey. Walking back to my car felt surreal, like I was moving through water. I sat in the driver's seat and just stared at my childhood home. The wreath on the door, the carved pumpkins on the porch steps already starting to rot. The upstairs window that used to be my bedroom, where I'd spent countless nights dreaming about my future. This wasn't that future. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I needed. My finger hovered over the call button for just a second before I pressed it. Carter and Associates Law Firm. The receptionist sounded so bored. "This is Dorothy Reynolds." I need to speak with Thomas Carter immediately. Tell him it's about the Morrison Trust. Ma'am, it's Thanksgiving. The office is, tell him Dorothy Reynolds called. He'll understand the urgency. I hung up and started the car. My phone rang 45 seconds later. Dorothy? Thomas sounded winded, like he'd run to the phone. What's wrong? Remember what you told me last month about my grandmother's estate? Of course, but we agreed to wait until, I want to execute all of it tonight if possible. There was a pause. Are you absolutely certain? Once we do this, there's no going back. Your family will, they just uninvited me from Thanksgiving dinner and slammed the door in my face. Whatever relationship we had is already gone. I could hear him moving papers around. All right, give me an hour to access the documents and begin the filing process. This is going to create significant financial implications for your parents and your sister. You understand that? That's exactly what I'm counting on. The drive home was a blur. I white-knuckled the steering wheel as rain hammered down, my mind racing through everything that had led to this moment. My grandmother, Ruth, had passed away 8 months ago, leaving behind an estate worth considerably more than anyone in the family had realized. She'd been a quiet woman, a nurse for 40 years, lived modestly, and invested wisely. I was the only one who had visited her regularly in her final years. Every Sunday, I'd drive to the nursing home, spend the afternoon with her. We'd play cards, watch old movies, talk about everything and nothing. My parents had been too busy. Gretchen had outright refused, saying the nursing home was too depressing. 3 months before she died, Grandma Ruth had pulled me close and whispered, "I've made arrangements, sweetheart. Don't let them bully you." At the time, I thought she was confused from medication. Now, I understood. She had been perfectly lucid. Her will had been a shock. She'd left everything to me, with one enormous caveat. I had to wait 1 year before accessing the inheritance, during which time my parents would manage her house and assets. However, the will included a specific clause: if my parents deliberately excluded or mistreated me during that waiting period, all restrictions would be lifted immediately, and I'd gain full control of everything, including all decisions about the family home she'd left them. Thomas had laid it all out for me 6 weeks ago in his office. Your grandmother was very clever, he'd said. She's essentially given you a nuclear option. The 1-year waiting period can be bypassed immediately if you can prove deliberate exclusion or mistreatment. But Dorothy, think carefully before using it. Family relationships can't be repaired after something like this. I told him I'd think about it, that maybe things would improve, that maybe my mother's coldness was just grief, that my sister's constant criticism was sibling rivalry, that my father's silence was just his way of coping. Driving home alone on Thanksgiving? That was apparently the wake-up call I needed. My apartment was dark and cold. I turned on every light and sat on my couch, staring at my phone. An hour passed, then 70 minutes. Just as I was about to call Thomas back, my phone exploded with notifications. The first call was from Gretchen. "What did you do?" Her scream was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Thomas Carter just sent Dad an email about Grandma's estate. You can't do this. That house is ours." I hung up. She called back immediately. I declined. My mother called next. I let it go to voicemail. Then my father, then Uncle Kenneth, then, inexplicably, Melanie. Texts started pouring in. "Gretchen, you're destroying this family, Mom. How could you be so selfish? Dad, we need to talk about this rationally. Uncle Kenneth, your grandmother would be ashamed of you. Melanie, asterisk, I can't believe you would do this. Call me, asterisk. I turned my phone face down and walked to the kitchen. My hands were steady as I poured myself a glass of water. The pie I bought was still in my car, probably ruined by now. I didn't care. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. I picked it up and saw I had 43 missed calls and 67 text messages. The family group chat I'd been excluded from months ago had apparently been reactivated just so everyone could yell at me simultaneously. I opened it. Gretchen, asterisk Dorothy is trying to take the house. Can you believe this, Uncle Kenneth, asterisk Uncle Kenneth, after everything your parents have done for you, Mom, asterisk I'm calling a family meeting tomorrow morning. Dorothy, you will be there asterisk Melanie, asterisk there has to be a misunderstanding. Dorothy, please call me back asterisk I started typing a response, then deleted it, then typed again. Me, asterisk I was uninvited from Thanksgiving dinner tonight. Not sick, not running late, not welcome. So now we do this my way asterisk the group chat went silent for exactly 90 seconds. Then it exploded. Gretchen, asterisk that's not what happened. You're twisting everything, asterisk Mom, asterisk we were trying to have a peaceful holiday. You always cause drama asterisk Dad, this is a massive overreaction me? Really? Because from my perspective, being told to leave your family home on Thanksgiving seems pretty dramatic. Guess I learned from the best. I muted the chat and called Thomas back. It's done. He said the paperwork had been filed. As of this moment, you have full control of your grandmother's estate, including the family home. Your parents have 30 days to vacate unless you grant them permission to stay. What about the other assets? The investment accounts, the life insurance payout, the savings? All transferred to your control. Your grandmother's instructions were very specific. She documented several instances of your parents and sister refusing to let you attend family events over the past year. She even had your Uncle Kenneth sign an affidavit confirming that you were deliberately excluded from Easter dinner. My mouth fell open. Uncle Kenneth did what? Apparently, he felt guilty about it. He contacted your grandmother directly and told her everything. She used that information to strengthen the conditions of the will. I thought about Uncle Kenneth's face at the dinner table tonight. The way he'd been avoiding my eyes. He'd known what was coming. He probably tried to warn my parents, and they'd ignored him. There's one more thing, Thomas continued. Your grandmother left a letter for you. I've been instructed to deliver it to you personally once the transfer was complete. Are you available tomorrow? Yes. Absolutely. Yes. After I hung up, I sat in the silence of my apartment. My phone continued buzzing with increasingly angry messages, but I didn't look at them. Instead, I thought about all the holidays I'd been excluded from. The birthday parties where I wasn't invited. The family vacations I only learned about through social media posts. The constant feeling of being tolerated rather than wanted. My sister had always been the favorite, prettier, more charming, married to a successful man. My parents had helped her buy her house, co-signed her car loan, babysat her kids every weekend. When I'd asked my father for help with my student loans last year, he told me I needed to learn financial responsibility. Melanie's betrayal cut deeper than all of it. We'd been inseparable growing up. She knew everything about my family dynamics, had witnessed firsthand how differently I was treated. Yet there she'd been at the table, laughing with the people who had just turned me away. I finally looked at her texts. Melanie, asterisk Dorothy, please. Your mom told me you were sick and couldn't come. I didn't know. This is all a misunderstanding asterisk Melanie, are you really going to throw away our friendship over this? I typed out a response. Me, asterisk you were at a Thanksgiving dinner I was explicitly uninvited from. You sat at that table while my mother told me I wasn't welcome in my own childhood home. Whether you knew beforehand or not, you stayed. That tells me everything I need to know about our friendship asterisk her reply came instantly. Melanie, asterisk Gretchen said you and your mom had a fight. She said you told them not to expect you asterisk me. Asterisk and you believed that without even texting me to check? For 3 hours you sat there eating turkey and didn't think to send me a single message asking if I was okay. Asterisk the typing indicator appeared and disappeared several times. Finally, she sent, I'm sorry me, I'm sure you are. Now I blocked her number. The next morning, Thomas arrived at my apartment with a leather folder and a manila envelope. He looked exhausted, and I realized he'd probably been up all night dealing with my family's lawyers. They're threatening to contest the will, he said as I let him in. Your father has already hired Preston and Associates. Let them try. I poured him a coffee. Grandma Ruth was evaluated by 3 separate doctors in the months before her death. They all declared her mentally competent. That's what I told them. He opened the folder. But I wanted you to understand what you're up against. Your parents are telling everyone you're mentally unstable, that you manipulated an elderly woman, that you're tearing the family apart out of spite. They don't get to rewrite history. They've been tearing this family apart for years. I just finally stopped pretending everything was fine. Thomas handed me the envelope. This is from your grandmother. She wanted you to read it after everything was finalized. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter on her favorite stationery, the kind with little flowers around the border. My dearest Dorothy, if you're reading this, it means you finally had enough. Good for you, sweetheart. I've watched your parents treat you like an afterthought your entire life, and it's broken my heart. I know this seems cruel leaving the estate to you this way, but I've seen how they are. They wouldn't appreciate anything given freely. They needed to learn what it feels like to lose something precious the way they've made you feel lost and unwanted for so many years. The house was never about the building itself. It was about family, love, and acceptance. Your parents forgot that. They turned it into a trophy, something to show off to the neighbors. They became so focused on appearances that they forgot about the substance underneath. You were always the one who saw the real value in things. You visited me when it was inconvenient. You held my hand when I was scared. You laughed at my old stories even though you'd heard them 100 times. That's worth more than any house or bank account. Use this money to build a life that makes you happy. Don't let guilt trap you into relationships with people who don't value you. Family is important, but only when it goes both ways. I love you, sweet girl. I'm proud of the woman you've become, and I'm sorry I can't be there to see what happens next, though I suspect it's going to be quite the spectacle. All my love, Grandma Ruth. P.S. The paperwork for the house transfer is in the blue folder. I've also included documentation of every family event you were excluded from over the past 5 years. I kept track. I thought you might need it someday. I had to read it 3 times before the words fully sank in. My grandmother had been planning this for years. She'd been watching, documenting, building a case, all while pretending to be a confused old woman who didn't notice family dynamics. She was something special, Thomas said quietly. I only met her a handful of times, but she made an impression. She told me once that you were the only person in the family worth saving. My phone rang again. Gretchen. I declined it. Thomas stood up. They're going to make this ugly, Dorothy. Are you prepared for that? They already made it ugly. I'm just matching their energy. Over the next week, the situation deteriorated rapidly. My parents hired a lawyer who sent threatening letters about elder abuse and undue influence. My Uncle Kenneth called and begged me to reconsider, saying I was destroying the family legacy. Gretchen showed up at my workplace and caused a scene in the parking lot, screaming about how selfish I was until security escorted her away. My mother left voicemails that alternated between rage and manipulation. How can you do this to your own family, followed by, we love you so much. Please come home so we can talk about this. Followed by, you're a disgrace to your grandmother's memory. I saved every voicemail, every text, every email. Thomas had advised me to document everything. The breaking point came 2 weeks after Thanksgiving. My parents' lawyer filed a formal challenge to the will, claiming that I coerced my grandmother and that she'd been suffering from dementia. They demanded a full investigation and requested that the estate be frozen until the matter was resolved. Thomas called me immediately. They're going nuclear. This is going to trial. How long will that take? Months, maybe longer. And Dorothy, they're going to drag your name through the mud. They're already spreading rumors about your mental health, your financial situation, your relationship with your grandmother. Are you absolutely sure you want to go through with this? I thought about my grandmother's letter, about the years of being treated like an inconvenience, about that moment on the porch when my mother had told me I wasn't welcome. I'm sure. The trial preparation was brutal. Depositions where my own family members testified that I'd been manipulative, unstable, and financially desperate. Character witnesses they'd recruited to paint me as someone capable of taking advantage of an elderly woman. My sister tearfully claimed I'd always been jealous of her relationship with our parents, and that I turned our grandmother against the family out of spite. The worst part was watching them lie so easily. During Gretchen's deposition, she sat across from me in a conference room wearing pearls and a navy dress that screamed responsible adult. Her lawyer had clearly coached her on appearing sympathetic. Dorothy was always difficult, she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Growing up, she would throw tantrums if she didn't get her way. Mom and Dad tried everything, but she just pushed everyone away. Thomas leaned forward. Can you provide specific examples of these tantrums? Gretchen faltered. Well, there were many instances. I need specific dates, locations, witnesses. I don't remember exact dates. It was years ago. Yet, you remember them clearly enough to characterize your sister's entire childhood. She shot me a look of pure hatred. She was jealous of me. She always has been. When I got engaged, she barely congratulated me. When I had my children, she never offered to help. I wanted to scream. I'd been her maid of honor, despite her constant criticism of everything I did. I'd thrown her baby shower when she was pregnant with her first child, spending money I couldn't afford on decorations she'd specifically requested. But pointing out the truth would make me look defensive. Thomas continued calmly. Mrs. Patterson, I have text messages here from 3 years ago where Dorothy offered to babysit your children. You responded, and I quote, I don't think that's a good idea. They need stability. Can you explain what you meant by that? I just meant she was busy with work. The previous text shows she'd specifically taken the day off. Would you like to revise your statement? Gretchen's lawyer called for a break. My mother's deposition was worse. She sat ramrod straight, her face a mask of wounded dignity. She brought photo albums showing family pictures carefully curated to tell the story she wanted. Look at this, she said, pointing to a picture from my high school graduation. We were all together, smiling. We were a happy family. Thomas examined the photo. This was taken 17 years ago. Do you have any recent photos with Dorothy? My mother's mouth tightened. She rarely attended family events. Because she wasn't invited. Correct? She was always invited. She chose not to come. Thomas pulled out printed emails. This is from last Christmas. You sent a group email to family members about Christmas dinner plans. Dorothy's email address isn't included in the recipient list. Can you explain that? That must have been an oversight. An oversight that happened repeatedly. I have documentation of 12 family events over the past 3 years where Dorothy was deliberately excluded from planning emails. My mother's composure cracked slightly. Sometimes it's easier to keep gathering small. Dorothy has a tendency to cause tension. How does she cause tension? She's always been sensitive, reading things into innocent comments, making everything about her. Can you provide an example? My mother shifted in her seat. Last Easter, she got upset because we didn't save her a seat at dinner. That's because there was no seat for her at all. She wasn't invited. She could have asked if she could come. Why should she have to ask to attend her own family's Easter dinner? The silence stretched out. My mother's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. My father's deposition revealed something I hadn't expected: guilt. He couldn't look at me directly, kept his answers short, and frequently contradicted himself. Mr. Reynolds, when did you last have a one-on-one conversation with your daughter? He thought for a long moment. I'm not sure. Approximately, maybe 2 years ago. What did you discuss? I don't recall specifically. Thomas pulled out phone records. According to these records, Dorothy called you 14 times in the past year. You answered twice and spoke for less than 5 minutes each time. Is that accurate? My father's voice was barely audible. I suppose so. Did you ever call her? I'm not good on the phone. But you speak with your other daughter regularly. Gretchen lives closer. It's easier. She lives 40 minutes away. Dorothy lived 3 hours away. That's hardly impossible. My father finally looked at me. Something flickered in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or a recognition of what he'd lost. But he looked away again just as quickly. I don't know what to tell you. We drifted apart. You drifted apart, or you pushed her away? His lawyer objected, but I'd already seen the answer in my father's face. The character witnesses my family had recruited were mostly their friends, people who'd heard only their version of events. A woman from my mother's book club testified that I'd always seemed troubled and standoffish at social gatherings. A man from my father's golf club said I'd been difficult, even as a teenager. But Thomas had found witnesses, too. My former roommate from college testified about the times I'd come back from family visits in tears. A professor I had been close to spoke about how I'd confided in her about feeling invisible in my own family. Most powerfully, 3 different staff members from my grandmother's nursing home took the stand. Dorothy came every Sunday without fail, said Nancy, a nurse who'd worked there for 20 years. Rain or shine, she was there. She'd bring magazines, crossword puzzles, sometimes just fresh flowers. Mrs. Morrison would light up when she arrived. Did other family members visit? Thomas asked. The parents came maybe 3 times in 2 years. The sister never came at all. Mrs. Morrison noticed. She talked about it frequently. What did she say? She said Dorothy was the only one who remembered that she was still a person, not just an obligation. Another nurse, Patricia, testified about a specific incident 6 months before my grandmother died. Mrs. Morrison had fallen and bruised her hip. She was frightened and in pain. We called her emergency contacts. Dorothy arrived within 45 minutes. The parents said they'd try to come by later that week. They never did. Did Mrs. Morrison mention this to you? She told me she'd made a mistake raising her son. She said she'd spoiled him and his wife, let them think. Family meant showing up only when it was convenient. She was determined not to let that pattern continue with her estate. My parents' lawyer tried to discredit the nursing home staff, suggesting they'd been influenced by my grandmother's money or had incomplete information about family dynamics, but their testimony was consistent and detailed. They'd witnessed the reality of who showed up, and who didn't. The most damaging testimony came from Dr. Margaret Walsh, one of the physicians who evaluated my grandmother's mental competency. Mrs. Morrison was sharp as a tack, Dr. Walsh testified. She understood exactly what she was doing with her will. She explained her reasoning to me in detail. She said she wanted to give her granddaughter a tool to free herself from a toxic family dynamic. Did she express any doubt about her decision? Thomas asked. None whatsoever. She said it was the clearest decision she'd made in years. Between depositions and court appearances, I was barely holding myself together. I'd taken a leave of absence from work, unable to concentrate on anything except the legal battle consuming my life. I existed in a strange limbo, neither fully part of my old life, nor able to move forward into a new one. Thomas met with me regularly to prepare for trial. We sat in his office going over strategy, and sometimes he'd stop and just look at me. "How are you really doing?" he asked one afternoon. "Honestly, I don't know. Some days I feel strong and righteous. Other days, I wonder if I should have just walked away without fighting." Walking away would have meant letting them win, letting them rewrite history and paint you as the problem. But fighting means confirming everything they say about me being vindictive and cruel. He shook his head. Standing up for yourself isn't cruel. Your grandmother understood that. She gave you this option because she knew you'd been conditioned to accept mistreatment. She wanted to break that cycle. I just never imagined it would be this hard. Family battles always are. There's no clean way to separate yourself from people who've been part of your identity your whole life. I appreciated his honesty. Most people wanted to offer platitudes about how everything would work out. Thomas acknowledged the complexity of what I was going through. The nights were the hardest. I'd lie awake replaying memories, trying to figure out when exactly my family had decided I was disposable. Was it gradual, or had there been a specific turning point? Had they ever really loved me, or had I simply been fooling myself for decades? I remembered being 7 and trying so hard to make my mother smile. I'd drawn her a picture of our family, spending hours getting every detail right. She glanced at it and said, "That's nice, sweetie," before turning back to baby Gretchen. The picture had ended up in the trash that same day. I found it there when I went to throw away an apple core. I remembered being 13 and overhearing my father tell someone on the phone that he had one daughter who makes us proud and one who's still figuring things out. I'd known immediately which daughter was which. I remembered being 23, introducing my parents to my boyfriend at the time. They'd been polite but distant, clearly uninterested. When Gretchen brought home her future husband a few months later, my parents threw a dinner party to celebrate. All those small moments had accumulated into a truth I'd been avoiding. I'd never been wanted the way Gretchen was wanted. I'd been the practiced child, the one they'd made mistakes with, before figuring out how to be good parents for my sister. The realization didn't come as a shock so much as a settling, like dust finally landing after years of being stirred up. It hurt, but it also clarified things. I wasn't fighting to repair a broken relationship. I was fighting to acknowledge that the relationship had never existed in the form I believed it had. The day of the trial, Thomas arrived with 3 boxes of documentation, medical records proving my grandmother's mental competency, bank statements showing I'd never asked her for money, emails and text messages where my family had explicitly excluded me from events, testimony from nursing home staff about how I was the only family member who visited regularly. And then there was Uncle Kenneth. He took the stand looking 20 years older than he had at Thanksgiving dinner. My parents' lawyer questioned him aggressively, trying to get him to recant his earlier statement about my grandmother's concerns regarding family dynamics. "Mr. Morrison," the lawyer said, "you previously claimed that Mrs. Ruth Morrison expressed concerns about how Dorothy was treated by the family, but isn't it true that you were simply telling an elderly woman what she wanted to hear?" Uncle Kenneth looked at my parents, then at me. "No, that's not true." "Then please explain to the court." "Ruth called me in March of last year. She was upset because she'd heard that Dorothy had been uninvited from Easter dinner. She asked me directly if it was true. I told her it was." He paused, his voice shaking. "I also told her it had been happening for years, that my sister and her husband treated Dorothy like she was barely part of the family. That Gretchen actively tried to exclude her from everything. Ruth asked me to document specific instances, so I did." My mother stood up in the gallery. "Kenneth, how could you?" The judge gave her a warning. "Mrs. Reynolds, sit down or you'll be removed from the courtroom." Uncle Kenneth continued, tears streaming down his face. "I thought maybe if Ruth knew, she could talk some sense into them. I never imagined she'd change her will, but honestly, I'm glad she did. Someone needed to do something. I have watched my niece be treated like garbage for decades, and I did nothing but feel bad about it. At least Ruth took action." The courtroom erupted. My parents' lawyer called for a recess. Gretchen was crying loudly in the gallery. My father sat stone-faced, staring straight ahead. The trial lasted 3 days. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor completely. "This court finds no evidence of undue influence or mental incapacity," she said, looking directly at my parents. Mrs. Ruth Morrison was a competent adult who made a deliberate choice about how to distribute her assets. The documentation provided by the plaintiff clearly demonstrates a pattern of exclusion and mistreatment. The will stands as written. My mother's scream echoed through the courtroom. The house had to be vacated within 60 days. Thomas handled all the paperwork while I tried to process what had happened. I'd won, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like the final collapse of something that had been crumbling for years. Melanie reached out through a mutual friend, asking if we could meet for coffee. I agreed, mostly out of curiosity. She looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, her usually perfect hair pulled into a messy ponytail. I didn't know, she said before I'd even sat down. I swear, Dorothy. Gretchen told me you'd had a huge fight with your mom and decided not to come. She said you were being dramatic and they were all trying to have a nice holiday without walking on eggshells around you. And you believed that? I shouldn't have. She twisted her napkin into shreds. I should have called you immediately. I should have questioned why you wouldn't at least text me if you weren't coming. Gretchen has been my sister-in-law for 6 years. She's my kid's aunt. It felt easier to believe her version. Easier for who? She flinched. I know I messed up. I've been thinking about it every day since. All those times your family treated you badly, and I just stood by because calling it out would have been awkward. I chose comfort over friendship. And I'm sorry. I stirred my coffee, watching the cream swirl into patterns. You know what the worst part is? I've spent my entire life making excuses for people who treat me badly. My parents, my sister, even you. I kept thinking if I was just patient enough, understanding enough, giving enough, eventually they'd see my value. I looked up at her. But they never did. I see it now. That's great, Melanie, but I needed you to see it on Thanksgiving when you were sitting at that table. I needed you to see it every other time you watched my family exclude me and said nothing. She was crying now. Is there any way to fix this? I don't know. Maybe, but not right now. I can't keep being the person who forgives everything while getting nothing in return. The conversation with Melanie left me feeling hollowed out. I drove home on autopilot, pulled into my parking spot, and sat in my car for 20 minutes, trying to process everything. She'd been my best friend for over 2 decades. We'd shared everything, first crushes, college anxieties, career struggles, heartbreaks. She'd been there when my first serious boyfriend cheated on me. I'd been there when her mother passed away from cancer. We'd taken road trips, celebrated birthdays, made elaborate plans for our futures that included being neighbors when we were old. But she'd also been there for every family slight, every casual cruelty, every time I'd been made to feel less than. She'd witnessed it all and said nothing. Worse, she'd benefited from my family's favoritism toward Gretchen. By extension, she'd been welcomed into their inner circle, treated like the daughter they wished I could be. I thought about all the times she defended them. Your mom doesn't mean it that way. Gretchen's just stressed with the kids. You're being too sensitive. Small dismissals that had accumulated over the years, teaching me that my hurt feelings were the problem, not the behavior causing them. The next day, I went to visit Uncle Kenneth. He'd been the one family member who'd shown any remorse, and I needed to understand why. His house was modest, a small ranch in a quiet neighborhood. He answered the door, looking older than I remembered, the trial having clearly taken its toll on him, too. Dorothy, he said, hugging me tightly. Come in. I just made coffee. We sat at his kitchen table, and for a while, neither of us spoke. Finally, he broke the silence. I should have done more years ago, not just at the trial. Why didn't you? He stared into his coffee cup. Cowardice, mostly. Your mother is my sister, and confronting her about how she treated you would have meant confronting the way our whole family operates. We don't talk about uncomfortable things. We sweep them under the rug and pretend everything's fine. That must be a big rug by now. He laughed, a sad, tired sound. You have no idea. Our parents were the same way. Appearances over authenticity. Keep up the image of the perfect family, even if everyone's miserable underneath. Is that how Mom grew up? She was the favorite, just like Gretchen. I was the disappointment. Didn't get into the right college, didn't marry the right person, didn't have the high-powered career they wanted. Your mother internalized all their values and passed them on. She genuinely believes that some people are worth more than others, and it's determined by how successful you appear. That's messed up. It is, but it's all she knows. When you were born, I thought maybe she'd be different with her own kids. And she tried, I think, with you. But when Gretchen came along, and was easier, prettier, better temperament, more social, your mother's old patterns kicked in. She saw Gretchen as her success story and you as her rough draft. Hearing it stated so plainly hurt, but it also validated everything I'd felt but been afraid to name. Why did you help Grandma Ruth with the will? Because I'd watched you get erased from family photos and memories for too long. Last Easter, when they had that dinner and didn't invite you, I lost it. I called your mother and we had a screaming match. She told me you were too negative to have around. I asked her when you'd ever been given a chance to be anything else. She hung up on me. I didn't know that. Ruth called me a week later. She'd heard about the fight from someone. She asked me point blank if the family was excluding you deliberately. I couldn't lie to her. She was devastated. Said she'd suspected but hoped she was wrong. His eyes were wet. She asked me to write down everything I could remember about how you'd been treated. Every missed invitation, every dismissive comment, every time they chose Gretchen over you. It took me 3 days to write it all down. When I was finished, I had 12 pages. 12 pages of being unwanted. 12 pages of evidence that you deserve better. Ruth read every word, had it notarized as a formal statement, and then rewrote her will. She told me she was giving you a way out, but you'd have to be brave enough to take it. We talked for hours. He shared stories about my mother's childhood, about the pressure she'd been under, about the ways dysfunction gets passed down through generations, like genetic traits. None of it excused her behavior, but it contextualized it. She was both perpetrator and victim, continuing cycles she'd never examined. Do you think they'll ever apologize? I asked as I was getting ready to leave. He shook his head. People like your parents don't apologize. They'd have to admit they were wrong, and their entire identity is built on being right. They'll rewrite history before they'll acknowledge fault. So, this is it. No reconciliation, no healing, just permanent separation? Maybe. Or maybe years from now, something will shift. People sometimes change when they hit rock bottom. But Dorothy, you can't wait around hoping for that. You have to build a life that works whether they change or not. He was right. I'd spent decades waiting for my family to become the people I needed them to be. The trial had finally forced me to accept they never would be. We parted ways. He hugged me, and I let her, but it felt different, like hugging a stranger. The house sold for substantially more than expected. I split the proceeds between savings, investments, and a down payment on a small cottage 3 hours away from my hometown. Far enough that my family couldn't just show up, close enough that I could visit Uncle Kenneth, who had been quietly reaching out to rebuild some kind of relationship. My parents sent a final letter through their lawyer. It was full of accusations and bitterness, ending with, "You've destroyed this family and you'll have to live with that for the rest of your life." I wrote back once, not through a lawyer, but in my own words. Asterisk, I didn't destroy this family. I just stopped pretending it existed. There's a difference. Asterisk, months later, I received a message from my niece, Gretchen's daughter. She was 17 now and had apparently found me on social media. Asterisk, Aunt Dorothy, I heard what happened. My mom won't talk about it except to say terrible things about you, but I remember how you used to babysit me and take me to the park when nobody else would. I remember you were the only one who came to my school play last year. I just wanted you to know I don't think you're a bad person. I think the adults in this family are really messed up. I hope you're happy wherever you are. Asterisk, I cried reading that message. Then I wrote back carefully, knowing that anything I said might be screenshotted and used as ammunition. Asterisk, thank you for reaching out. You're perceptive and kind, and I'm proud of you. When you're older, if you want to reconnect, I'll be here. But I understand that's too complicated right now. Focus on being a kid and living your life. You don't have to fix the adults around you. *. She sent back a heart emoji. I didn't hear from anyone else in the family. Uncle Kenneth and I had dinner once a month. Careful conversations where we talked about his work, my new job, anything except the nuclear crater where family gatherings used to be. Do you regret it? He asked me once over Italian food at a restaurant halfway between our homes. I thought about it honestly. I regret that it was necessary. I don't regret doing it. He nodded slowly. Ruth would be proud of you. For what it's worth, I am too. My new life was quieter, simpler. I adopted a cat, planted a garden, made friends with my neighbors. On Thanksgiving, I volunteered at a community center, serving meals to people who had nowhere else to go. It felt more like family than any dinner I'd had in years. Sometimes I still got angry. Sometimes I mourned the family I'd always wanted but never actually had. Sometimes I wondered if I should have handled things differently, been more forgiving, found a way to compromise. But then I'd remember standing on that porch in the rain, my mother's cold voice telling me to leave, the sound of laughter from inside the house. I'd remember years of being treated like an obligation rather than a person. I'd remember my grandmother's letter, her determination to give me a way out, even after she was gone. I'd made the right choice. It wasn't the easy choice, and it wasn't the one that let everyone stay comfortable. But it was right. My phone occasionally buzzed with messages from numbers I didn't recognize, usually around holidays. Gretchen had apparently gotten a new number, specifically to send messages telling me I was ruining her children's lives by not being around. My mother had friends reach out with stories about how devastated she was, how I'd broken her heart. I deleted them all without responding. 1 year after that Thanksgiving, I hosted my own dinner. Uncle Kenneth came along with 2 friends from work, my next-door neighbor who was widowed, and a couple I'd met at a cooking class. We crammed around my small table, passing dishes, and telling stories and laughing at jokes that weren't particularly funny, but were offered with genuine warmth. Nobody's affection was conditional. Nobody was keeping score of who contributed what. Nobody was waiting for me to step out of line so they could cut me out. This, I realized, was what Grandma Ruth had wanted for me all along. Not the money, not the house, not even the revenge, just the freedom to build a life surrounded by people who actually wanted me there. What are you thankful for? Uncle Kenneth asked as we went around the table, a tradition I decided to keep despite everything. I looked at the faces around my table. Imperfect people who had shown up because they wanted to, not because they felt obligated. Honestly, I said, I'm thankful I finally learned that family isn't who you're born to. It's who shows up for you when it matters. My phone buzzed. Another unknown number, another message that started with, "How dare you?" I turned it off and passed the potatoes. For the first time in years, maybe the first time ever, I was exactly where I was supposed to be.